Hello, what you doing? You wagging your tail? You got a pamper on? Okay, I am back. Alright, this is phase 2 of putting this car back together again. Now, this car is filthy. The more and more I look at it, it is just, wow. So, what my main goal is to get everything back together again, get the car running, sort out all the gremlins in the car, and then pull it out of the driveway, soak everything down, clean as much as I possibly can on this car, rewire a lot of this stuff, and just get the car in good running order. Let me come around here. And the next step is going to be removing the plastic dip off of the car that's been on the car for about, I'd say 4 years. And this stuff is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Look at this. Look how clean that bumper is. That'll be a whole nother video of me removing this. Whether or not I re-dip the car or actually I might even bought a little sample of this stuff. You know, that's not what this stuff is. Vinyl wrap. I've never vinyl wrapped a car. Been looking at a lot of videos and everything, but you know, watching videos and doing something, we all know is a different story. So this is kind of going to be like an experimental. I'm probably going to wrap a few parts, see how I like it, see if I can actually do it, and then if this doesn't work out or if it's too expensive, then I'm probably going to have to re-dip the car. And some of you are saying, oh, the paint looks pretty decent on the car. Yeah, about 90, I'd say 80% of the car is in good shape. But the only problem with that is that this front bumper, when we towed it back to my house, when I got the car back, it took, when we put it on one of those U-Haul car dollies instead of having the car towed. It was just cheaper, it was like 50 bucks. Strap it behind my truck and that was it. But since the car sits so low and the nose is so long, and we didn't kind of jack up the trolley, but the dolly correctly, when we pushed the car onto the dolly, I screwed up the front bumper. I don't know if you can see the stress marks of all the cracking of the paint here. I actually painted this bumper myself probably 7 years ago, but I don't have a place to actually paint it. I'm not going to pay somebody to paint my car. Well, for what I use this car for, it's not worth spending a lot of money on painting this car. But also, I got a lot of crap in here. Sorry, I got to clean all this stuff here. Also, the reason why I'm looking to either re-dip it or to vinyl wrap the car is that, let's come over here, this garage is a mess. You can see I got an extra dashboard sitting back here. Is that this, I took off the Transam spoiler or the hatch and I put a formula spoiler on here, and this is actually a lot lighter and the car rides so much better with this hatch on here. But if you can see, it's red and it was dipped, but I didn't dip it very well and it's all coming off and painting, you know, coming off and everything. But the rest of the car is in really good shape. And you can see here, since the sun has been hitting the top of here, this is what's faded off. But you gotta remember, this is 4 years of sitting outside in the sun, rain, snow, sleet, you name it. And then we started, you know, pulling the plastic dip off, but we realized it's too thin here, so I'm gonna have to hit it with either gasoline or like a thinner to get all the junk off. But all right, let's get started. Oh, I want to show you one more thing too.
Quality of this video is going to be okay, but I wanted to show you LT1 guys a few things that I think is a must for these cars for upgrades. Is the factory hub on these cars. A lot of these cars, most factory cars have the 3-prong setup on here, and since this is a built motor, it has a steel crank and it has a keyway, and that's a good point too, is that most of these cars, or none of these cars, came with a keyway. I don't know why they did that. That's just crazy to me. On a small block Chevy, a lot of times they'll spin, the actual hub will spin on the crank and destroy the snout of the crank. And especially if you're running a supercharger like I am, that was a clusterfuck for me. A couple of my other first generation motors I built, because because back in the day they didn't have these. All they had was the factory, three-prong thing, and either you would have to have a machine shop cut the keyway in there, and then it was never accurate, or you ran the supercharger and you spun the hub right off, and it would never sit right, and again you would destroy the crank and all that kind of good stuff. So then finally companies came out with these billet hubs and everything, and obviously this goes on to here like so. A lot of the bolts, because they're not evenly spread apart. And then a couple of the other goodies here that you're going to see here as I'm installing this is this. This is a 12 rib setup on here. Hope this comes out with the spacer in the back here. Let me see. Yeah. And then that goes on to here with washers in the back. This is like an old design. This is an old design, I think. I mean, whatever, but it's hub centric to the crank, so you don't got to worry about the wobble and everything. And then you got to put these stupid washers on the back of the spacer to bring this out to line up with the Procharger setup. Now with these, just as like a quick tutorial on pro charging your LT1, and I'm pretty sure they've updated the kits in the future, but this kit is an old one, probably an earlier one. And let me see if this comes out. I'm getting blinded by the light. There's a bracket right here, and it's only held on by literally this plate. This whole supercharger setup on here is held on by one plate. That's probably a quarter of an inch, maybe. Let me go get a tape measure. Let's see. Yeah, quarter of an inch thick. Now, when you're running a 12 rib setup, 15 to 18 pounds of boost, right? This fucker right here would flex, throw the $50 belt, well at the time from Procharger it was a $50 belt, a 12 rib belt, and then take out your serpentine belt and leave you stranded on the side of the highway. And for the longest time we could not figure out what was going on and why we were throwing these belts, and we realized that on the dyno we can actually see the whole supercharger just moving over from the force, from the tension, because we would crank down the tension. We were thinking maybe it was a slippage issue or anything like that, and I came this close to putting a cog belt on the car, and in theory cog belt, yeah, it doesn't slip and everything, but it doesn't give, it's the harmonics are a little bit different for a street driven car, and it doesn't give. So how to explain, there's always some slippage between this pulley and the supercharger and the crank, especially when you left the throttle on and off fast and everything like that. With a cog belt it doesn't do that, and it puts a lot of stress on the front bearings and everything. So for a street driven car, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So what we did is that we modified, it's hard to see because everything's tucked away into this car on this particular LT1, but we modified the bracket and we did another piece up on top, and we pulled everything together to make it a much sturdier kit. But yeah, it is what it is. So let's get into the time lapse and put this thing back together so we can go ahead and wash it down and shake it down. I don't know if you can see this, but let's see if I get the light in here. This is why a lot of people hate these F-bodies, because let me see. There is just absolutely no room in these cars. This is going to be pushed forward a little bit. This has been modified to go forward. If you notice that this fan in here, let me see if I can see that. You see that? Yeah. In the kit, there's bolts that push this fan in further closer to the radiator because the belt gets in the way and everything like that. But you could just see how tight it is in here and everything. Come over to this side. See. It's just finger licking tight in here, so and the Supercharger does not help at all. It just occupies this whole section here. Custom made pipe we cut and bent here. This goes all the way underneath the car, through the front bumper, into right there, into there, which has been hit by the which I hit the whole front bumper. You can see it's all squished and everything, but it snakes in there. You see, it snakes in there and has a nice size intercooler in the front of the car. So basically, how I set this car up is that, and most of these particular cars, from the fact, I mean, from when you do a ProCharge setup, right? They had the bright idea of laying the intercooler flat here, right underneath the engine, and sucking the air through the intercooler and the piping up like that. But the problem with that is that you get all the road debris, you get heat soaked like a mother, because remember, he's sitting underneath the car, so when you're stuck in traffic, you know, so basically this car had a lot of heat soak problems in the past. And let me bring it up over here and see if this works. I'll probably cut this out, but let's get it up. So what I've done is, number one, added an auxiliary fan right in here. You can see that. And there's no core support in the bumper. So basically, it goes through the intercooler, and it passes right through the intercooler, right to the condenser, through the fan, through the radiator. And this car stays 160 degrees all day, every day. It just eliminates all the heat soak problems and all the overheating problems with these cars just in general. Okay, I'm back. I'm trying to make a video. Everybody likes to call you. So back, where was I? Oh yeah, how I ran the intercooler system on this car and how well it works. And this is old school stuff. This is nothing new. Maybe to the guys, the younger generation coming into these LT1s or even the LS1s, the same applies basically. Now the only trade-off of running a supercharger in the nose of the car without, well, what most do, and I didn't want to do, is most will actually cut the frame here, move everything forward, put the intercooler and sandwich everything in between,
on here, but I didn't want to cut this structure over here because I wanted to run the factory AC, which it still has everything there. I just have to hook it up. I wanted to have the power, but not have the car overheat in traffic and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of sacrificed a little bit, and I actually unbolted the front support, the bumper support here, and tucked everything into the front of the bumper. Now the only drawback of that is that obviously the bumper is very soft. You can see it has no support in here. And later down the line, once I get time, the bumper's going to come off. I'm going to build a hole. I'm going to weld in a structure here. These are things that I never really got around to because this was, you know, in my youth, this wasn't really a priority. It was making the car go fast. So, you know, that's the only thing. You know, you can't get bumped into because there's no support here, and it just flops around at high speed. But I've never had a problem at high speed with this car, which is amazing, which I thought would be a problem, but you know, it's really not a structural piece, so who cares on here. Basically, I just want to clean this car up, get it running, get all the bugs out of it. Right now, I'm going to use the Opti that I have in there with a stock coil. And basically, when this car was given to the other owner, I actually tuned it down. I put the different pulley on there so it doesn't make as much boost. So we're just gonna knock out all the bugs of the car, get everything cleaned up, rewire some of the stuff here. I mean, and just clean out all the junk. I mean, look at all the stuff that's in here. I mean, you got shit all over here, which I didn't realize. And then finally upgrade to a LTCC system that I have that I've never put on the car. Previously, I was running a Deltec system, and for you guys who are not familiar with the Deltec systems, they're basically using the GM coils from the Aurora motors, the V8, the front-wheel drive setups. And there was a company that worked. No, I'm sorry. The owners from Deltec were actually employees from Motec that quit or something like that. Actually, I met them in person, and they were gracious enough to show me all the control boxes and how they built the system. It was actually a really good system, but the only problem with that, obviously, they're no longer around. Never had a problem with high boost. I mean, it was perfectly set up for the car, but the LTC system is going to be used with LS type of coils in the future. And we're going to be doing some fuel upgrade systems on here, because remember, this is an old system. It's got twin Walboro 255s in the back from Racetronics, and it has the whole hot wire setup that goes, very basic hot wire setup to the pumps, twin setup on here, and believe it or not, I'm running old MSD 50-pound injectors. Which is tiny today, tiny because with the new stuff out there, you can run 1,000 cc. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, all this stuff. But at the time, this is what we had for the type of computer that you're running, the ohms, and for idle characteristics that I was looking for. The 50-pound injectors were kind of like it was like we're at the borderline of what we were pushing for the car. I think it made to the wheels at the time 738 to the wheels, and I'm almost like, you know, 800 pounds of torque, which was plenty for the street, but for today's standards, it's child's play. Out motor, it's set up to take a lot of abuse in the power, but budget and time and the availability of parts at the time when we built this was the problem. So, but now sky's the limit, man. Anything. Who knows? I might even dump the whole ProCharge system and just put a big jam turbo on the car or something down the line. But all right, let's get back to all the shit we got to put on to get this car running. Bye. Okay, I've just wrapped up the coolant lines on this LT1 motor, hooking up the 1001 different coolant lines that go to this damn motor to make it work. And quick history of this motor: it's sort of like a small block Chevy. The basics are, and this is just for the newbies, for the LT1s, and if you think this is boring stuff, let me know in the comments. But I figured I'd go along the process, kind of teach everybody about these motors, and for the people who don't know about them, help them understand them a little bit better, help them make them run better so you don't blow them up. And so basically, back in the day, to get the 10-to-1 compression ratio that these motors has, which was outstanding for the time, back in the early 90s, because most of these V8s had 9-to-1 compression, 8-to-1 compression. You can think about that for a minute. 8-to-1, 9.5. If you had 9.5-to-1, you were like, woohoo, you know. These had almost 10.5-to-1 compression back in the early 90s when these motors came out. And to help with emissions and cooling, GM decided to toss out the old type of cooling system from the traditional small block Chevys from 1955 to like 1990, or specifically for these LT1 motors, is to, well, traditionally the small block Chevys, Fords, the coolant runs through the block first, then through the heads, and then goes back out and it circulates. Well, this is the opposite. It's reverse cooling on here. So basically it runs through the heads, then through the block, thus cooling the aluminum heads. Faster and getting better combustion, less detonation, so on and so forth. You guys get the point on that. But the biggest problem with these cooling system is that people do not know how to bleed them correctly, and wind up thinking that they are either they're completely filled the system, and or they have bled the system correctly, and or going down the road and then overheating and then can't figure out what's going on. In a later video, I'll go into like a detailed, like how to bleed the system and all that kind of good stuff. But just this little tech tip, I guess, for you guys. All right, back to work. Well, maybe a couple of these. We'll see. Wanted to go over a little more details of the tuning process in a later video, but as a quick note, I'm going to show you, see if that fits. There you go. This is a stock mass air meter. Let me undo my trick light setup here, so I can get a good shot of this. See that now? Go behind the camera. Hold on. There you go. It's been ported out. There you go. Completely. All the fins have been gone. Been gone. I can't even speak. Everything's been ported out of it as big as it possibly can. But you can't just go and hog out these throttle bodies and expect the car to run right. This has been tuned specifically with that in mind when the tuner went in there and did his work. So a little tech tip and little tricks back in the day where, well, now you can buy bigger throttle bodies, you can buy bigger, we've always had, bigger mass air meters. I still kept the stock 58 millimeter throttle body, and people would be like, well, why don't you go to a bigger one? They got that Holly makes all this other stuff, and so yeah, but the tip-in throttle, the throttle response, the mid-range torque and power where you really want it, especially for the highway pulls that I used to do. It really helps with the 323 gears I have in the back of this vehicle. So, another tech tip. Okay, let's get back to putting the shit back together again. Alright, some of you commented on my shitty ass wiring, or why is this wiring so long? Originally on the kit, this went all the way down to the bottom of the car. That's where the mass air meter was. It was actually on the intake side of the blower, and then we switched it to the pressure side of the thing so you get a better airflow. And it just, I guess over the years we've never, I mean I've actually respliced them for other sensors and other stuff for other stuff, but this was the original long wiring harness, and I'll get to that later on, but for now, we just want to get this car running. Alright, this is going to end part dos, whatever. I got everything back together again. You can see that. Got all the nooks and crannies done. The computer's still out because I want to check to see what's going on with the wiring harness, if there's anything going on with it, or if it just was a fluke that the other computer just crapped out. But I want to make sure before I start running the car that I don't burn this PCM out. But I'm going to leave the blower belt off for now. Don't worry about it. I'll get all the good blower sound and everything. Don't worry about it. I need to check the valves on this car, check the spark plugs, just make sure everything is running correctly the way it's supposed to be. And we're going to go with part 3. Well, I'll put the blower back on, get some test hits, maybe even get the car registered and insured right now. I don't know, we'll see. But it's September already, so time's a ticking before the winter starts coming, and I want to get all the preliminary stuff done to this car before I start going crazy with it. And the main thing is to clean this car up, get all the oil and dirt and dust and dust bunnies that are all over the place in here, and really go through everything, change all the fluids as far as the brake fluids, the fuel filters, you know, just as a, you know, and go through some of the suspension parts and check everything over and do a little few upgrades on here. But in part 3 we'll go into more further detail. We'll get the car running, you'll get the nice sound clips and everything, but until then, stay tuned. Talk to you later.